Hello, Girl Scout Spirit of Nebraska. This is Erin Finken, Program Specialist for the Omaha area, and we are joined again today by entrepreneurs Libby and Roger Riley, owners of Riley Signs and Graphics and McGill Painting. This is our second session to discuss with them some of the pratfalls and the advantages to being a small business owner. They're going to walk us through some of their past projects and talk to us a little bit about financials and how that works with a small business. Welcome back, Libby and Roger. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Erin.
Hello.
So if you guys can see up on my screen, I've started sharing a slideshow that we're going to go through with them so they can just talk to us a little bit about their work. And then Libby's going to walk us a little bit of the way through how financials work when you are a small business owner. So what are we looking at here in this picture?
You mean what I'm going to hold up?
Yeah, you want to start with the financials? We can do that.
Yeah,
So,
sorry. I thought we were going to get the business out of the way.
Absolutely. So Libby, you kept the books for your business for many years. Is that correct?
That's correct. And
what are you showing us here?
this thing I'm holding up is a ledger sheet, and see how there's, I don't know, 20 some columns of things you have to keep track of in your business, as opposed to here's my personal register for my personal checking. So this is a checking account register for the business, this big thing. And the reason it's so big is that if you're doing payroll, you have to keep track of taxes and how much you pay somebody and how much you pay the government. And then you also have all these categories, and there's 14 of them on this sheet where you have to list things like your insurance, your utilities, your vehicle expenses, your just whatever you would be spending for a business, your equipment purchases, your materials and supplies. You have to keep track of every single one of those things as an individual thing. So at the end of the year, you balance the entire thing, and your accountant can take all those numbers and do your tax return. You don't have to do that with your personal accounts. You do want them to balance, and you do need to do budgets with both types of accounting systems, but it's way simpler to do a personal accounting system than it is to do a business. There's just a whole lot more involved with keeping track of every single thing you do, so that you know if you're making money, you know how much money you made on a job, you know how much you should budget for a certain size of job. You know what your receivables are, which is the money coming in and the money going out. There's just a lot to keep track of. It's not, I think it's fun. A lot of people think it's boring, but I like balancing numbers and I'm good at it, so I have fun with it. So I can't think of anything else I'd really need to add to that.
So how did you get the skill set to be able to do that for your company?
I worked as a payroll clerk and a bookkeeper doing financial statements and things like that. I was trained in an office at Frank McGill Inc. And there's where I learned about, like, for payroll and stuff, about all the tax tables and how to use them, and that you have to go to the bank and make your payments for your FICA and your state. And those are all the different names for the taxes that we pay to either the federal government or the state governments or the unemployment department, because the business has to pay all of those things for payroll to have employees. It's expensive to have employees. Anyway, I learned there.
So what would happen if someone wanted to start their own business, but they didn't have your skill set and they didn't have that background in accounting and bookkeeping?
Well, it would be wise to take an accounting course at a university if you were wanting to get really into accounting. That doesn't mean you have to be an accountant, but you do need some just basic bookkeeping skills.
Gotcha. So is there a situation where you would take those books to an actual accountant?
Sure, lots of people do. And in fact, some people even hire agencies that just do their payroll for them. Usually that's a company that might have, say, 10 or 20 employees, and it's maybe They might think it saves them some money to just have an outside agency do it because they don't need a full-time person for that work. But yeah, I don't know. There's not very many businesses that train people to do that. Like I got trained almost 50 years ago. And then
So that would be kind of another expense that they would have to track then. So it would be kind of deciding, is it more cost effective to hire an accountant, or is it more cost effective to have your own accountant or
yeah,
someone that has the skill set to do that? And that would be dependent on kind of the size of your small business, do you think? And how
yes,
much revenue it's generating?
absolutely. And in our business, the fact that I knew how to do all of those things did save us a lot of money, because the only thing we used an accountant for was our tax return. And when he did our tax return, it was less expensive for us than for some people, because I took him in all the ledgers that were completed, and he did have to reconcile them, make sure that they were correct. But um, that's still cheaper than if he had to break everything out for us, because he would put a lot more time into it and charge us per hour.
Gotcha. So you were keeping the ledger, then he was checking the work, and then he
Yeah,
knew the tax law and was doing that part of it.
yeah,
So you could segment it out depending on the skill
yes,
set of your employees.
yes. And some businesses do segment out their payroll because they don't have anybody who knows how to do it and they don't want to learn. So they just hire a company that just does that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So then did you ever have to do payroll then with your companies?
Yes. But we usually ended up, for us, because we're not a big company, employees cost you more money than their hourly rate because of the insurance and because of the extra taxes the employer is liable for. And we just thought, for the amount of extra work it was for us, the amount of extra bookkeeping and what have you, with only a couple of employees, it really wasn't worth it. So then we did instead a thing where we would do what's called subcontracting. And these people would bill us a regular bill for their work instead of being an employee. And it was cheaper to do it that way with only a handful. And then you hire them when you need, just when you need them. You don't hire them like full time or anything. We were never a big enough company to keep full time employees year round.
So that's a way to get someone to come in and do work for your company without them being a direct employee of yours.
Yes, is just
Okay.
to hire them per project and have them give you a price on what they would charge to help with a particular project.
Now you mentioned that you had to have insurance if you had a full-time employee. Do you have to have insurance when you have subcontractors working for you too?
Yes, we did. We always had, but it's a different kind of insurance, and you don't have to carry the workman's compensation, which is expensive, and you don't have to pay the unemployment insurance. If someone is an employee, you are required by law to pay those extra insurances.
That makes sense.
But for a subcontractor, you don't have to pay those extra insurances. But we did still have to have other types of umbrella policies and liability for the jobs, and bonding if a customer asked for bonding.
Right.
You also have to notify the government at the end of the year how much money you paid out to these subcontractors.
That's true. And you have to issue W-9s at the end of the year,
Yeah.
which we did. We did all of those things. And
So that's part of what makes your taxes a little more complicated when you're a small business owner.
Right.
yes, absolutely. Yep. Because that particular little process, I would just say to the accountant, here, we paid so-and-so this amount of money, and will you send them a W-9? Here's the information. And he'd do it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So did you have any other final thoughts on the financials? I know you mentioned it would be a good idea for anyone that was interested in pursuing this to possibly take a finance class and learn a little bit about how that works before jumping in. And then also the possibility of them hiring someone if they don't want to go that route. Any other thoughts on the financials?
Well, and even if they didn't take a class, just a basic bookkeeping you might learn even on a YouTube video or something. And budgeting is really important, no matter if it's personal or business. So that I think there's tools out there, probably on YouTube to help with budgeting, no matter what. They can
Yeah,
budget now.
I
With,
agree. We
yeah,
we actually had a budget worksheet in one of our classes a couple weeks ago that was just a travel budget worksheet,
yeah, there you go.
and it was just meant to set your budget for, going on a camp out. So that's definitely a life skill, whether you want to open your own business or even just, keep your checks from bouncing.
Absolutely. And girls, especially teenagers, say they babysit or something, dog walk or something where they have a little income and they're working for, say, buying a bicycle. Well, then they can start with their budget of investigating the cost of what it is they're after and how much money they can make a week and how much they can save. And they can budget it so that they can buy these bigger ticket items on their own.
Right. And, Girl Scout cookies is a good starting point for that. I think that was my earliest exposure to setting a budget. Everything translates into how many boxes of cookies to get you to whatever your goal is.
Yep. And then how much money you made as a troop as to what your summer outing would be. What could you
Right.
afford? And yeah, that was always a real important thing in our troop.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's been my girls' first experience with that too. So it's a good lesson. Girl
It is.
Scout cookies is a good lesson
Yeah.
in financials.
Yep. And planning. Yep.
So, Roger, we'll switch gears here a little bit.
Sure.
What's the picture we're looking at up here on the screen? Is this a diagram of the table that we looked at last time we met?
Yes, I know we discussed this a little bit last time, but when you're approaching a customer doing this type of work, it's always a good idea to do a little sketch to explain to them exactly what it is that you're proposing. And then you also want to have a formal bid generally, but this was the drawing for doing that table on top of the Fernando's restaurant out on Pacific Street.
So your bids would be like drawings and that type of thing. But this would translate to any type of small business, really. If you're providing a service, you would be providing a bid in most cases.
Right. It'd just be something where, and we did do that where we would type out bids and itemize, this is how much this will cost and that'll cost, and here's the time frame. And, we would put all the components in the typewritten proposal that might accompany a drawing like this.
Now,
And what would go in the written proposal?
How much we would charge for materials and labor and insurance and
the time frame, completion date,
yeah.
how long the bid is good for, because you can't hold it open forever. Generally, they're good for about 90 days.
And when we expect payment.
Right, and how payment was to
Right.
be executed.
Right.
One thing I know we didn't mention before, and our kind of work is kind of specific, based on artistic ability, but most small businesses are not. People see a need that needs to be filled, and they set up a business to accomplish what that need is. As an example, I had a friend that lived in Saipan for many years, and that was very difficult for them to get disposable diapers. And so he started a company called Mr. Moms, where he would import diapers to Saipan and then sell them in his store. So, as long as there's a need, there's a place for a small business.
Sure. That's kind of an interesting thing. I never would have thought they would have trouble getting diapers.
He built a really good, solid business selling diapers that he bought from the States.
Huh. So that would probably be the first step, if you didn't have already a skill set that you were trying to build a business around, would be looking in your community and identifying a need.
Yep.
Right. Because then you have an instant business if you fill the need.
Yep.
And along those lines, I would guess you would also want to add in identifying a clientele so that you can actually sell this stuff to someone.
Then you have to think how to market it, or if
Yeah.
it's direct sales, or if you put an ad, on YouTube or whatever. But, you have to start with something you can market.
Yep.
Sure. That
Market.
makes sense. So I saw in this roll of photos that you sent me, there were a couple of newspaper clippings.
Do those go bigger or no?
I can zoom in. Is that a little better?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, that-
So this looks like a variety of different types of work. I'm seeing logos for Creighton University, mural of a skeleton breaking through a wall and a refinished ceiling. So is this just kind of a piece about all of your work over the years?
Yeah.
Those are actually different newspapers though too. Like one is a Council Bluffs newspaper. Somehow somebody said something to them about us and the journalist called us and said, I'd like to interview and do an article. We didn't even do any work in Council Bluffs, but we
Oh,
live in Iowa. And so he wrote a really nice article with lots of pictures. That's the one with the skeleton, but um, that was just an odd thing. Usually the articles are more focused on a particular job where like that one where we're standing in it and the bishop is there and the priest, they're showing off what they've had done in their building. And they're doing,
that looks like the St. Francis of Assisi church that we're looking at right now. That looks like it's more specific just to that job.
yes, and that would be more the types of articles. There's one in the Logan newspaper that was the restoration of the courthouse. What's ironic
This
about
one.
that is the way we got that job was because of a newspaper article about discovering what was under their drop ceiling. And I went to the courthouse to pay my taxes and had my grandson, who was an infant, with me, and talking to the ladies there. They said, do you know anybody who knows how to do this work? And I said, yeah, we do. She said, would you talk to the boss? And I said, well, if she doesn't mind me having an infant with me to talk business, that's fine. And she didn't care. So I took the baby and went up and saw the courtroom and they wanted to know if we could fix it. I said, yeah, we can do it. And
So
actually,
this looks like a kind of a variety of pieces here. This one is kind of highlighting a community event. The other one seemed like it was almost meant to let the parishioners know what was
yep,
going on and tell them about the budget. And then the other one was just kind of a profile piece on the
yep,
type of work you've done over the years. So, but
yep,
the interesting thing is that would all get your message out there of the type of services that you're providing. So it would
yep,
be a way to communicate with the community about what you're doing.
yep. And I think we got work from those articles too. Especially there was one, and it's not here, but there were a couple in the Omaha World Herald. One was the butternut can, that building has since burned down, but that was a big deal. That was on top of a 9-story building, and it was a huge, giant coffee can. I don't think any of the girls would probably remember it, but Roger and I painted that in the 90s. And there was another big project at Creighton University, and they showed Roger clear up on the scaffold on the bell towers, steeples, I'm sorry. And that was a big deal that was on the front page of the World Herald as well. So those kinds of things really put our name out there.
So newspapers, you know, in over the course of your business would have been more landing on people's stoop and would have been more of a higher
Everybody,
circulating,
yeah.
yeah, type of advertising. So um, I'm curious, do you think that there's something that translates to today's market for younger entrepreneurs that would work well for them?
Facebook, and I'm sure there's other more hip things for the younger people, but people a lot of times do have Facebook pages that promote businesses and they ask people to like them. And we have a Facebook page that's still out there, even though we're not working. And people still go look at it. I get notifications that whenever somebody's visited our page. And I think it's a real good way to promote a business.
Did you do anything else along those lines, like a video or brochures or anything along those lines?
We would occasionally send out a mailing, and it was something I put together to the churches, and we'd mail a specific area in this region of the country, hoping to get a response in a particular area so that maybe we'd have maybe 2 or 3 responses in one area so that you wouldn't have to travel all over to try and generate business. But occasionally we sent mailings out.
And we did have a real nice brochure when we were working that we would give people. We also just had a website, and that's a really good tool to have.
So that would be another cost benefit analysis thing for your financial person.
Yeah, but there,
The driving around marketing versus mailing to someone versus social media and websites, that type of thing.
a website is way cheaper than doing mailings and stuff. But when we were doing mailings, I don't think the internet even existed. We've been around a while.
So there's also a few pictures in here of some church interiors. So I just wanted to go through a couple of those, and if you guys had anything you wanted to share about those pictures. But I just think the infrastructure needed to get that painting done is interesting and is kind of an interesting thing for the girls to see. So there was that one of the scaffolding, and then what's this one? Is this paint on this wall?
I can't see what you're pointing at.
Ah, it says Heartbeat of America.
Oh, okay. That's a car enthusiast who has a bunch of hot rods, and he has a shop in the basement of his garage where he does a lot of the work on them. He has a lift, and so he does a lot of the work himself. And so we painted a bunch of logos all over the whole inside of his shop there.
But it's his personal garage
Yeah,
at
so
his house.
it's
But it's bigger than a garage. It's a whole building dedicated to him having his hobby. There's even an apartment in the building. So, I mean, it's not a typical garage.
So how did you get into cars? Did you do other work with vehicles?
Yes.
yeah, he was a part-time race car driver and full-time electrician.
Well, and we got into doing cars when the Saline race team was being built in Omaha. The Saline Mustangs.
Saline Mustangs.
The race cars were
1983.
built in Omaha in the 1980s, and these were famous nationwide and maybe even worldwide, these Saline Mustangs, and we lettered them for these race teams, and we lettered their semis that took them to the races, and it was a big deal. We even had, when the Saline race team ended up moving to Detroit in the 1990s, and so then we didn't do their letterings anymore, but there were people with lots of money who would buy these race cars, these custom built race cars, and say they had an accident, something happened to the decals, they would actually look us up to get a replacement from the original designer, because they didn't want to trust the work to just some little sign shop on the corner.
Yeah, it was a restoration of the original race car.
Yeah.
There was an article about the original race team in Hot Rod magazine, and they happened to mention my name in there, and so we had people contact us so that the original artist could do all the graphics on the restoration.
Now, is that kind of like a NASCAR kind of thing when you say that? Is that sort of what the mental picture you?
Yeah, they were actually production stock cars. So like you would get a car off of the showroom floor, and they would do slight alterations to them.
Okay.
With raise.
Like to remove weight?
I'm sorry.
What they did? They took parts off to remove weight. Is that what they did to them?
Well, they souped up the engine and the transmission,
and it's really limited what they can do. And primarily there were Camaros, Mustangs, and Porsches that competed. And they were all, it's semi-professional competitions.
But it was a lot of, there was just this whole industry just for the Saline Mustangs, and they were a big deal in their day. I don't know if they're still around. I mean, I know the old ones are still around. I don't know about any others, but we used to do the whole team.
Very cool. I'm still going through some of the church pictures here. I know there were. a
This
few
plan
of
one.
Creighton University at the end too. How did you get involved with that?
We even before we had our own business, one of the very first jobs I did in town on the side was I went and painted floor numbers in the stairwell in some of the Creighton dorms,
The
where
old
it'd be,
dorms.
you know, fifth floor, sixth floor, fourth floor, whatever. And so a lot of the people at Creighton University I started to become familiar with, and they would call me down there to do various different sign projects or super graphics or murals. Uh, there's one that says the Kiewit Center where it says racquetball and
Oh yeah, it's on
volleyball.
the bottom one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a graphic that was in the Kiewit Fitness Center. Uh,
We did a lot of stuff in the men's locker rooms for the men's basketball team and the ladies basketball teams. And
so when Dana Altman became the coach down there, he wanted a new logo. So the Jays in the basketball was a logo we designed for him. And there's the picture that we have here is in somebody's driveway. Was a fan that wanted it on his driveway. So he hired me to go out and paint that logo on his driveway.
And then was that with other sports too? It wasn't just basketball, right?
We designed a whole line of them with a baseball behind it or a soccer ball behind it. I don't know that they ever used them, but the one for basketball was the biggest deal.
Roger did a lot of their design work for things like even lettering their vehicles and a lot of work in the locker rooms, which was fun because he could do big mirror graphics, and we'd do stools and letter them for the individual players and just make things custom for the players so that they really had a nice environment to get ready to play and what have you. A really cool thing on here to me is the plane, that number 701.
Mm-hmm.
That was our friend's plane. Was not a happy ending, but that plane was actually in 6 Days and 7 Nights, the movie with Harrison Ford, and Disney owned all the planes that were used in the movie. Only 3 survived the movie, I believe, and 1 Harrison Ford bought or was given. 1 our friend John bought, and then Disney owned the other one. I don't know what the status is of any of them now, but
Mm-hmm.
this one, before it crashed, Roger had relettered it. They wanted it to look original, and so that was cool that he did all that.
So that's what it looked like in the movie.
Yep. Yeah, and it was a very, very cool plane. It was very unique. There's a lot.
Looks like just a lot of landmarks around Omaha.
Yeah, these at the very bottom, the pediatrics ward, I'm sure that stuff is gone, but in the 70s and 80s, super graphics were a really hot item in all the schools and hospitals, and we did super graphics all over Omaha, Council Bluffs, Red Oak. I mean, small towns that have us come down and do work, and they were fun. We did those while we were working for other people and did them as part-time jobs just to make extra money.
And a lot of molding. Oh, there's another Creighton for their shuttle service.
They just changed that this year. There's one on here that you should see the girls might be interested in, the 175A. Can you see that? It's all the way to the right.
Nope,
It's up
back
further.
up again.
Okay.
It's up much further. And
Oh, there.
yeah, 175A. That is a Girl Scout Gold Award project, and done by our daughter Samantha. We were redoing the courthouse in Logan, Iowa, and that's what all these ceiling pictures are, and they needed signage in there, and we suggested that they might want to ask this Girl Scout who was looking for a project to take on this project, and they were thrilled. They threw a reception for her and everything, but she did this project. She had quite a few different people that helped her with it. She learned a lot of new skills, and they're still there. What is it, 12 years later, and they still look just beautiful. There's 23 karat gold on them. She did the marbleizing. Her team, they would cut all the plywood and do all of the prep work, and she did most of the finished work. But that was a really cool Girl Scout Gold Award project.
That's a good lesson for our girls too, to take a look at the types of things you can do if you collaborate with area entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It's definitely just a way for girls to prop each other up and for area business owners to help support Girl Scouts.
Well, and that Girl Scout got a huge college scholarship because of that, which was really nice.
Well, I think we actually got to the end of our slideshow, and I think we hit all of our talking points that we wanted to talk about today. So unless you have any final thoughts, I think we're at the end of our presentation. Did you have anything else you wanted to share with the girls?
I just want to say it's kind of fun to look at all these old pictures, because some of them are really old, and I've kind of forgotten about a lot of these things. So what we've done, we've been very blessed to be able to do.
Well, thanks for taking a little walk down memory lane with us. That was cool. Thanks for sharing all of that with us. Roger, did you have any final thoughts?
If somebody has an idea, go for it.
Yeah.
It's the greatest thing in the world to work for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, Roger and Libby, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experience and your past exploits through your business with us today. I think there were some great insights there and some fun pictures to look at. So thank you both so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Erin.
All right.